Welcome to your first code review session for the Python code course. Now, in this screen, you will see I have Visual Studio Code, and my basic.py is in the Python and 0 calculator folder. So as it stands, the first project is the calculator project, and I have labeled it with a 0. So it's really like project 0. It's like the very initial project that you will do. And I'm just going to run line by line. There's about 162 lines, so hold on to your seatbelts because we're going to really break it down so you can know all the different parts of this project. Okay? And if you do have questions, you just hold them until the end of the presentation. And at this time, you can feel free to put any comments or questions in the chat at any time, because I don't want you to forget your questions. I want you to be able to give your questions at any point in time. And actually, since it's pre-recorded, during the live session, I will be able to answer your questions if I'm able to while I'm watching the chat, okay? Alright, so let's get into it. The first line says import Tkinter as TK. So this first line just tells me that I'm going to be utilizing a module. And this module is just what we're going to use. It's built for graphical user interface. It's a very basic, been around for a long time. So the keyword import, as you can see, is colored in pink. And we use that keyword a lot whenever we want to import a module. Whenever we want to utilize a module, we'll go ahead and use that keyword import. Then next we want to look at this keyword as. The keyword as lets us know that we are going to use an alias. Okay, so whenever we refer to Tkinter, instead of writing Tkinter every time, we're going to use the alias TK. So if you jump down here to line 8, I'll give you an example of where TK is being used. So instead of writing the whole word Tkinter, I'm referring to it as TK. Alright, so as you can see in VS Code, if you have Python installed, your environment variable is set up, you're going to have also the ability to install an extension. And then you'll be able to see all of these little, when you hover over a specific word, a thing that IntelliSense recognizes, it's going to give you some information. Okay, so sometimes those are helpful if you don't know like what's going on and you have no clue. So you're going to be able to download this or be able to copy and paste this code to the GitHub that I'm going to provide you access to during this course. Alright, anyway, I digress. So I showed you line 8. Line 2, let's go back up to it. Line 2 through 5. I'm using these from Tkinter import button. So there's a couple of ways of going about importing the Tkinter module. So I can import everything with an asterisk, or I can just import the ones that I want to use. So from, as the keyword says, I'm going from Tkinter, the stuff that's inside Tkinter, and I'm going to import a specific class, a specific thing, or whether it's in this case, they call them widgets. So there are different types of widgets within Tkinter, and the widgets are in a class of their own. And so we have a button class, a string var class, an entry class, and a label class in which we're going to use throughout our project. Okay? And then on line 7, you will see something that's in green, and this is a comment. It's ignored by the compiler. So when you go to run this Python code, this is not going to be executed. It's just kind of like note to self, okay, so this is what's going on, this is what I'm about to do. It kind of describes what's going on. And this is a key element of a comment, is that hashtag. Every comment starts with a hashtag. If you don't have that hashtag and you just start typing words, it's not going to know to ignore it, and then you're going to get a whole bunch of errors. So make sure that you are providing that hashtag before every comment. Okay, so this comment says, set up the frame of the interface and give it a title. Okay, so basically, well, I'm going to give it a title and a background color. So in this little section of my code, I am setting it up so I have a variable. So I am assigning the TK function. It's a widget, top level widget of TK, which represents mostly the main window of the application. Okay, and it has an associated TCL interpreter. Alright, no need to know all the ins and outs of that. Just know that it comes from a class called capital TK. Alright, and it just gives you the initial screen. Okay, I call the screen root. Alright, so we could have called it screen. We could have called it anything. Alright, but it does not have to have the word root. A variable you want to define can be anything you want, and it normally starts with lowercase, and it could be anything. Okay, so I'll keep it as root. That's a commonly accepted name for a Tkinter module. Or, yeah. So next thing we want to do is look at this title, root dot title. Okay, so this dot is very special. Oh, we did it in line 8, but we're doing it again here. It means that we're referring to something inside of root. Well, inside of root, which was in fact a class, has, I should say, a title method, something that it does. It's a function that it's going to accomplish. So the title says, okay, I'm going to set a title to this screen. And it could be any string. As long as you put it inside quotes, that is what's going to show at the top of your screen, okay, or the window in which we are doing our application. So I put basic calculator. You could have put anything. So if I just put calculator, it's only going to say calculator, okay. And this up here, you can do Control K and S to save everything, or you can just click on this little icon next to the open editors. Okay, and that saves everything. Alright, so line 10 is also another method within root called configure. And what configure does is allow us to put certain values within root. And this value that we want to configure is the background. Okay. Alright, so I just made the background gray. You can make it anything. You can make it blue, you can make it red, you can make it yellow. And when we go to do exercises, I'll let you play around with certain features and functions within the code base. So, and this is the lovely thing about having a code base. You don't have to start from zero. You don't have to start from hello world. You can just review and look over code and see the syntax and see all the different functionality that it has. Something that's working is the best way to start learning how to code. Hands down. You don't want to start twiddling your thumbs and trying to figure out how to do it on your own. Okay? So, anyway, the next section that I want to talk about is this string section. So I want operator string. So there's a few strings that I'm looking at. I have an operator, which maybe I could have chosen a better word, but basically the operator is what's coming in into the application, whether it's going to be a number or a plus sign, minus, whatever that operator is, that's what's going to be assigned as a string variable. Okay, so that's why I initialized it here to nothing. It's just empty quotes. Okay, so we assigned, see that assignment means whenever there's an assignment, there's an equal sign. So the assignment that we're doing now is assigning an empty string, which means just the quotes with nothing in it, and I'm going to give it the name operator. I could have gave it any name. It could have been digit, or it could have been character. It could have been anything, but I just call it operator. Okay, so this is what's going to be operating within our calculator. All right, next on line 14 we have this text input. Text input is a variable, and it happens to be a special kind of variable, a string var variable. Okay, so string var, as you remember on line 3, is one of those classes that we defined, or that is already defined in Tkinter. So we're going to be using that because we're going to be able to vary specific strings within our widgets. Okay, so we'll talk about it a little bit more, but just know that string var is a special method for string variables within the context of the Tkinter module. Okay, so we're assigning that to the text input. So this text input is really the input that comes from the user. Then we have another string var, status text. So the status text is the text that is displayed on the screen to kind of help the user along. It's like helper text at the bottom that tells you, hey, you got an error, or this what you put in, or anything like that. So this is those are the two operator strings, or strings, 3 strings that we have defined. Okay? All right. Next, we want to talk about line 18, the setup of the calculator environment. Now, we have what's called an entry widget, and I called it E. All right, so we assign this entry widget. Now, I'm going to say assign every time there's an equal. Okay, we're going to assign, that's what I mean when I say assign something to a variable. So I said we're assigning the widget, the entry widget, to the E variable. Okay, and so there are certain specifics to this widget, and if you hover over it, you'll see it says master optional any. I know it looks like gibberish, but it's an entry widget which allows displaying simple text. So that's all we're going to do is display some text to the screen. All right. In other application, an entry means that the user can enter something. And for this specific application, we're not going to be expecting the user to type anything. So this is pretty much a click application where all they're doing is just clicking. There's no expectations of typing into this application. So the entry also allows you to put text on inside of this field. Okay, so and it's coming from root. That's the next thing, is that our master is the root. Our master is the actual window. So we need to refer to this window when we're talking about this widget. Okay. And then after we define the root to be where the information is coming from or referring to, and I have the FG, which means foreground, is equal to green. And so that's the color of the foreground. Well, foreground means the actual font, all right, of the entry. So the entry is going to be text, and the text is going to be green. All right, then the text variable. This text variable is the actual one where we are going to be using the text input. Remember, we used text input on line 14 as a string var, so it's going to be changing. So we could have put something in there with quotes around it, but it's going to be changing, so we give it the attribute text variable. All right, and notice I said attribute. So that is also a way to describe the features within a widget, or by the attributes. Okay, so foreground is an attribute, or the FG, and the text variable is an attribute, and justify is an attribute, the width, and the border width. Okay, so I've defined all of these for this widget. Next, we talk about how is it going to be displayed in the calculator environment. Well, we're going to be using a layout called grid. All right, so grid uses rows, columns, column spans, row spans, padding to give a location for the information to be displayed. All right, so where is it going to go? And this one is going to go row 0, column 0. And it's going to be a column span of 5. So it's going to run over 5 columns. So that's going across. Okay, columns go up and down. And so the column span is going across the columns. Okay. Then it's a padding of 10 in the X direction, padding of 10 in the Y direction. All right. When you play around with these numbers, you'll be able to see how it's affected. But we're not going to do that right now. I just want to give you the basic understanding of different parts of this application. All right, moving right along, we're going to talk about the reaction to clicking the numbers and operator buttons. All right, so this very first thing, DEF, what's that? Well, on line 22, DEF, which we see a few of them, line 30 and line 37, are function definitions. So DEF is a keyword or descriptor that says, hey, get ready, because I'm about to tell you a list of instructions to do when and it could be done in a repeated fashion whenever the function name numclick is called. Okay, so right now this is a definition of a function called numclick. So, I mean, it could be any click. I guess I shouldn't have put numclick. It could have been my click or app click. You know what I'm saying? Just to say that when a user clicks on a number or a operator, then this function can be called. And so this number, which can also be an operation symbol, and you'll see in a minute what I mean. It could be an operation symbol, so, and it could be a number, but this number, this word number, is a placeholder. It's a parameter. So we're basically saying we're expecting a number to come in, or we're expecting something to come in. That could be an int or a string. And when it comes in, we're going to do something with it. Notice that over here on line 25, we're going to change it to a string, and we're going to assign it to operator. Okay, so remember we made operator empty string. Now we're going to fill it up with what's being brought in. Okay, and I kind of skipped over line 23 and 24, but 23 and 24 are basically the variables that we used in the beginning, that we defined in the beginning, the operator and the status text. We're going to be using it within our function. Okay, so that's why we kind of define them again, or let the function know, hey, this is coming from the outside. So that's why it's called global. This is coming from the world of basic.py, which is the name of this file. So from a global perspective, operator and status text is being used within the function. All right, so we're assigning operator. So whatever was in operator, which was nothing in the beginning, but as a user clicks on something, then this number is going to come in, and that is when we assign it to the operator. Now, it's going to be a number in some cases, in some cases it's going to be a string. So that's why you're seeing both data types. So this str is a way that we can, whether it's a number or a string, we're going to make it a string. It has to be a string because operator started out as a string variable. So we want to keep it that way, and that's the only way that we can concatenate a string with a string. Okay, or basically we're combining. That's why we have this plus sign here. We're adding this string to what's already here. Now, I'm glad that I wrote it this way, because there is another way, an alternate way to write this. Because what I'm saying is that I want to assign whatever is in operator and add whatever was clicked, the number that was entered. But I could have also put this plus sign here and forget about rewriting this word operator. Okay, and that way I can save myself a little bit of typing, and it reduces redundancy, so I'm not repeating myself. Okay, so plus equal is a special type of operator that allows you to say, hey, whatever was an operator, I'm adding to it string number. Okay, and this is going to work perfectly fine either way it goes. Then on line 26, I have the text input dot set, and set is a method within our string var. Okay, now remember, text input is coming from the string var method. So dot set is coming from the string var class, I should say. And so set is a method within there that allows you to assign some string to that variable. Okay, so this is where we can change what's happening within our text input. Alright, since it's a string var, we're changing it now. And we're changing it to whatever's an operator. Okay, so operator's a string, we're setting it. Then we are also going to set the text to let the user know, hey, this is what you put in. So the current entry is operator, whatever was put in. So that's what's going to show up in the status, like a status bar, you could say. Alright, so the next thing that we want to talk about is a preview area function. Well, actually, I think I may have taken this out. Update status. I don't think it's actually being used, so I'm going to skip over it. But if you do have any questions about it, feel free to ask. It does use global variables, and then it does just change the value of our status text. So it can be used, and if it is used, then that's all it's used for. Pretty straightforward. Alright, next thing we'll talk about the clear button. So clear button is action clear function, and it uses the standard global variables of operator and status text, and all it does is set the text back to nothing. That's all it does, is basically set it back to nothing, and then it tells the user 0. You know how on a calculator you can just set it goes back to 0 when you hit all clear? Okay, and then the status text is going to say, hey, well, what was in there previously, it's been cleared. Okay, so that's just an alert to the user, hey, it's been cleared, and then it gets set to 0, the text input. Alright, moving right along on line 45, we have another function, the equal button. So action equal is going to be called whenever we see the equal button. So the equal button is more than likely is going to be assigned to be called when this button is defined, and we'll see that in a little bit. So it uses the global variables operator and status text. It says that the answer starts as an empty string, and we want to assign the evaluation of the operator. So we're going to try, this is a new thing that we're looking at. We're going to try and see if we can't evaluate this string. Alright, so this is what is known as exception handling in Python. Okay, we're going to have a try except block of code that says, hey, we're going to try this, and if it doesn't work, we have an exception like syntax error. If it has some other kind of error like a value error or something like that, we can define different things to do or ways to respond to this type of error. Okay, so we're going to try to evaluate and see what happens, and we're going to turn it into a string, and then we're going to assign it to answer. Then we're going to put, if that works, just fine, right? Then we're going to set the answer to the text input. So that's where we're going to display to the user the answer. And then we'll set the operator with an equal, and then the answer, we'll put that in the status. So basically it's telling you, hey, this is the whole full sentence, or your whole equation of what you put in, and it equals to your answer. So it really gives you a good description of the whole scenario in which you've done, your operation. Is a little bit above the regular calculator calculator you might see. Some calculators do show you above the input what has been inputted. So basically in the status message is also doing that for you. Okay, so if for some reason there's something crazy going on, or the user puts in some different sequence of operators that don't make sense or doesn't make sense to the evaluation function, to the eval function. Basically this is eval, and eval allows you to try to, figure out if it works, if you can evaluate it, and it's going to use order of operations and stuff, so you don't even have to think about how it's going to calculate. Okay, so if for some reason you get a syntax error, the syntax error kind of catches the invalid syntax for the eval, and if for some reason there was, we use this alias. Remember, the as keyword is the alias, and we use a colon. Oh, I didn't mention the colons. Notice that every single one of these definitions have a colon, and then notice that there is a indentation for the block. So we have to make sure that we also indent here. But actually in VS Code, it automatically does the indentation for you. As long as you have that colon there and then you hit enter, it's going to indent for you, because it's going to know exactly what you want to do, that you want to define this variable, or this definition of a function. Okay, so as long as you have a colon here and then you hit enter, it's also going to indent for you. So Python is very particular about indentation, because that's how it knows the blocks of information that it's looking at, or the blocks of instructions. So every block of instruction is indented. Okay, so we have a function block, we have a try block, which says in this indented region, these are all the lines of code attached to the try. And then down here on line 54 and 55, these two lines of code are attached to the except. Okay, and notice there's a colon here as well. So colons are pretty special, pretty unique to definitions and definition of functions, try, except. It's going to be in your if statements as well. So they kind of give you a guide to the end of a special type of statement. Okay, so with that, we'll go down to line 58, the negate button function. And that function, action negate, tells you to just basically put a negative in front. Okay, so basically it's kind of like taking the opposite of what's in the operator. Okay, and then it'll be set to the operator, to the text input. All right, so that will be displayed. All right, the next thing we want to look at is line 64, the percent function gets called whenever the percent button is pressed. So action percent, and notice whenever we don't have any variable or no parameter, remember the number that was featured above, whenever there's nothing, we just leave open and close parentheses. That means we're not expecting anything from the calling function. When it's called, you don't need to add any arguments. Okay, so there's no arguments, so it just has the open and close parentheses. And then the colon, you hit enter and it automatically indents. We're going to use the global operator, and now we have another try catch. We're going to try and evaluate the operator divided by 100, and then we're going to set the text, we'll set the status, and then we'll do the operator equals answer. Alright, So the operator is equal to the answer in this case. Alright, and then after we do that, if for some reason it doesn't work out and there's a syntax error, then we're going to display the error. So we're going to let the user know, hey, there was an error, and it's going to print y.args. So all the arguments within the syntax error are going to be displayed. Alright, next thing is the action factorial. This is what happens when the factorial button is pressed. So we'll try and evaluate it and turn it into an integer and call it the base. We'll assign it to base. The answer is assigned the value of 1. And then we'll do some operating on this base. Alright. So as long as base is greater than 1, we're going to loop. So now here we have a while loop. Okay, so this while loop is basically going to keep on multiplying. You see it has star equal base, so it's going to take whatever's in the answer and it's going to multiply it to the base. And then we're going to subtract 1 from the base. So that means we're reducing the value of base by 1 each time, and then we keep on multiplying the answer. That is actually what is happening with the factorial logically. So if we had a factorial of 5, it would be 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. Well, we don't need to multiply by 1 because we already know that 1 is 1. 1 times anything is that same thing. So as long as it's greater than 1, we can keep on multiplying. Once we get to 1, that's when we get out of there. Alright. And then we'll stop multiplying once we get to 1. Alright, and then the text input dot set is displaying the answer. The status text dot set is giving a summary of what happened. And then there's an exception. If for some reason there's a syntax error, there's a status text set to error. And if there's a value error, we're going to say, hey, something happened. Only integers are accepted. So that means something other than an integer came out. And so that's going to be displayed in the status text. So this is a way to keep your code from breaking. You can softly respond to some error without breaking your code. Alright, so this is very important, and you know, this is probably like tutorial number 64 if you were taking a regular tutorial course, you know what I mean? So this is really a condensed version of learning how to code. You know, I want you to get an understanding of the different aspects and the parts of coding before you even start typing any line of code. Actually, most senior developers and things like that, they're copy and pasting, they're getting their stuff from Stack Overflow and things like that. So just bear in mind, I'm fast tracking you through the whole process of being a good developer. Okay, and so let's continue with our talk. Notice that I don't have that as y or as anything, so that was optional. We don't have to have an alias, okay? Because I'm not actually displaying any arguments of y or what's actually inside of syntax error. Okay, so now we can move down to our buttons. All right, so all of that we just talked about were the functions, what we do every single time you know, a button is clicked or something like that. So now we'll talk about the buttons. On line 92 through 102, we have our first row of buttons, 7, 8, 9, and then the division symbol. Okay, so I kind of grouped them by the rows. And you could have done this anyway, but this is how I chose to organize this code. And so we go on to button 7. We assign the button widget to a variable named button 7. I could have named it anything, right? But that's our descriptor. And notice I did that for 8 and 9. And then I named the division symbol button to be the button divide. So, like I said, it's good to make a very descriptive name for your variables. So that's what I did. All right, so then next we talk about the different attributes of the widget. And so the button widget has a master, right, attribute. Notice that the very first thing is the master. And then the next attribute, we talk about the text, what's actually going to show up inside the button. Then we have a command, what's going to happen when this thing is clicked. We assign the lambda function click numclick of 7. Now, lambda is a special kind of function, a special kind of definition. Whenever there is an expression expected inside of the function. So it's going to call this function and it's going to send over what's inside parentheses, which in this case on line 92 is the 7. Okay, and so we're doing that for 8, 9, 10, and all of the other operations, right? We're just submitting the string or the number. Notice how we had num or string as the data type argument. So here it is. It can be a number or it can be a string as it relates to the operators. And it's going into the function when it's called. So this is the calling of the numclick function. All right. And then other attributes is the pad x and the pad y. And we have the BG, which is the background color. And then we have FG, which remember we talked about was the foreground or the font color. Okay. All right. And then we have grid. That's the placement. So this is on row 2, column 0. Then the next button, same row, column 1. Row 2, column 2. Row 2, column 3. All right. So all of these are defined here. We can move right along. And then the second row of buttons, we define them 4, 5, 6, and the multiplication. We call it with the lambda and insert the argument. And then we add all the other attributes there. All right, we can move right along with that. Then the button 1, button 2, and 3 and subtraction are defined. And they're also button widgets. Same process there. Okay. Now let me know if I'm going too fast because these are kind of repetitive. Basically, they're just calling the function. Now with this one on the 4th row, we're calling the action negate. Alright, so that's that negative button. Alright, so we're making whatever's inside the operator negative. Alright, so then next we're gonna go down to factorial, %, equal, and clear. So all we're doing is assigning the lambda to this action factorial, action %, action equal, or action clear. Now I was able to do it without any arguments as well. So just keep in mind it is flexible. It just lets you know. And if for some reason you don't have any arguments, you don't have to use lambda. You can just say command equals and then action factorial. No lambda required. Okay. If you do use lambda, it will still work, as you're going to see when I run it. We're almost done, guys. And the status message area is where we use the label widget. The label widget is assigned to the status message, and this is where we use the text variable status text, which is that string var that we talked about. Alright, that string var, because it's going to be changing throughout the code. And then it's assigned to row 9, column 0, down at the bottom. And then a column span is 3, so it's going across 3 rows. I mean 3 columns. If it was a row span, then it would be going across 3 rows. Alright, and with that we end with the main loop. So basically it just keeps on refreshing every single time within a loop, and that's how it knows that it's in the loop, is using the method main loop that comes from root. Okay, that comes from the main class TK. Alright, and that concludes our code review. Let me know if you have any questions at all. Thank you so much for watching.